The throne room was silent, and for Emperor Kalon, that was the worst sound of all. It was a deep, hollow silence that not even the distant hum of the flagship's engines could fill. He sat upon the obsidian throne, a massive construct of stone and embedded starlight, and felt its weight press down on him. He had ruled the Galician unity for 300 standard years. He had seen nebulas born and stars die. He had witnessed the greatest martial displays in the known galaxy. Yet, he felt nothing but a weary, endless boredom. Before him, the last champion of the day was finishing his demonstration. Groth, a mountain of a being from the high-gravity world of Granic, was pounding his fists against his own chest, creating a thunderous boom that echoed in the vast chamber. He then lifted a gargantuan weight above his head, the muscles in his back straining like coiled cables. The courtiers, a colorful array of species in fine silks and gleaming metals, gasped and murmured their approval. Admiral Daehyun, a tall and severe man with a perfectly trimmed beard, gave a sharp, approving nod from his position at the foot of the dais. Emperor Kalon only saw a series of moving parts. He saw the physics of the lift, the biological advantage of Granic's dense bone structure, the predictable display of aggression. There was no spark, no soul. It was just noise. Groth finished with a triumphant roar, slamming the weight down. The floor vibrated. The court applauded politely. "A remarkable display of brute strength, Your Majesty," Admiral Daehyun said, stepping forward. "The Granic would be a formidable addition to your personal guard." Kalon's eyes, old and the color of faded stars, drifted from the champion to the high, arched viewport behind him. It was filled with the swirling blue and violet of a hyperlane transit, endless motion leading to more endless motion. He was so tired. "He is strong," Kalon said, his voice a low rumble that carried effortlessly across the quieting room. "But can he tell me why he lifts the weight?" The question hung in the air. Groth blinked his small, deep-set eyes, confused. To show my strength, glorious Emperor." "And then what?" Kalon asked, leaning forward slightly. "You have shown it. I have seen it. Now what fills the space where that effort was?" Groth stood silent, baffled. The court's murmurs ceased. They had seen this pattern before. For months now, the Emperor had been testing warriors. Not just in combat, but in conversation. He sought something none could provide. Champions of blade, masters of energy whips, telepathic duelists from the crystal moons of Zor, all had been found wanting. Their power was impressive, but to Kalon it was empty. It was like admiring a beautifully painted vase that was cracked and could hold no water. Kalon sighed, a sound of genuine sorrow. He raised a thin hand, heavy with the ring of office. "Thank you, Champion Groth. You may depart. The treasury will grant you the agreed reward." As Groth bowed and shuffled out, clearly disappointed he had not been chosen, Kalon looked at his trusted guard captain, Tae-Sik. The man was a pillar of stoic loyalty, his face a mask of calm duty. But even Tae-Sik could not hide the faint concern in his eyes. The Emperor's melancholy was becoming a matter of state. "It is all the same, Tae-Sik," Kalon said softly, so only his captain could hear. "They perform. They do not reveal. I see their skill, but I do not see them. Where is the truth in it?" "Perhaps, Majesty, the truth is simply in the doing," Tae-Sik offered, his voice respectful. "No," Kalon said, his gaze returning to the stars. "The doing without meaning is just machinery, and I am surrounded by the most sophisticated machinery in the galaxy. I am looking for the craftsman." He stood then, and the entire court fell to their knees. His figure was still commanding, draped in robes of darkest blue that shimmered with a captured night sky. "I have seen enough of curated demonstrations," he announced, his voice now filling the chamber with authority. "The quest for a champion has become a stale play. We will change the stage." He looked to Admiral Daehyun. "Dispatch the imperial decree to every corner of the Unity, to every star system, outpost, and dockyard. We will hold a grand tour. My fleet will travel. We will not wait for champions to come to us. We will go and find them." The tests will be real, immediate, and unscripted. Let every being with a claim to strength or skill know. The Emperor himself will witness them, not in this polished room, but in the places they call their own. A wave of excited chatter swept the court. This was unprecedented. The Imperial fleet, embarking on a galaxy-wide talent search. What exactly are we searching for, Your Majesty? Admiral Daehyun asked, already calculating the logistics. Emperor Kalon looked out at the endless stars, his ancient eyes searching for an answer he could not put into words. He sought a thing forgotten, a feeling lost to centuries of ceremony and absolute power. He sought something that would make the universe feel real again. We are searching, he said finally, for a reason to smile. The decree was sent. Hyperwave communications burst from the flagship, racing along subspace routes to every inhabited world and station. The news spread like stellar radiation. The Emperor was coming. He was testing everyone. The message even reached the far, lonely edge of the Cygnus sector, to a grimy, bustling orbital facility known as Dockyard Station Theta. It was a place of constant noise, flickering lights, and the hot metal scent of hard work. Here, the news scrolled across a cracked data screen in a cluttered break room, between a notice about reactor coil inspections and the weekly hydration ration schedule. A man named Jin Ho, covered in synthetic lubricant and leaning back in his chair, took a sip of lukewarm tea and watched the words scroll by without much interest. It had nothing to do with him. He was just a mechanic. The air in Dockyard Station Theta always tasted like metal and ozone. It was a constant, rhythmic symphony of clanging, hissing plasma cutters, and the deep, grumbling vibration of Starship engines on test runs. Gravity was a suggestion here, with sections of the dock having different pulls, so workers moved with a practiced, loping gait. In the main repair bay, a heavy cargo freighter named the Starlight barge hung suspended in magnetic clamps. Its stern drive cowl opened up like a fractured egg. Inside that open hull, Jin Ho floated on a micrograv sled, his body halfway inside a tangled nest of power conduits and thruster fuel lines. His coveralls were stained with a history of different leaks and spills. His short black hair was hidden under a snug cap, and his face, sharp and focused, was smudged with a dark streak of grease. In his hands, he held a multi-tool, its ends shifting from a spanner to a laser calibrator with a soft click. Primary plasma injector is out of alignment by 0.3 degrees. He muttered to himself, his voice barely audible over the bay's noise. No wonder their efficiency dropped 40%. Someone forced the housing during the last patch job. He shook his head. It was a simple fix, but it required patience and a feel for the machinery. You couldn't just hammer it into place. Jin Ho! A voice called from the entry hatch. He pulled himself out of the engine. Sumin floated there, a datapad in one hand, a self-sealing drink pouch in the other. She was a few years younger than him, with a practical, observant face and hair tied back in a severe, efficient knot. Her job was logistics and parts tracking. She knew where every spare bolt and flux capacitor on Theta was supposed to be. I have your requested sealant strips, she said, tossing the small box to him. He caught it neatly. But the admin office is complaining about the extra requisition. They say the barge's captain didn't authorize level 4 components. The captain authorized a fix, Jin Ho said, wiping his hands on a cloth that only made the stains worse. This is the fix. The level 3 strips will fail again in 6 months. This will last the life of the ship. Do they want him coming back or not? Sumin gave a small smile. This was their usual dance. Jin Ho saw the truth of the machine, what it needed to function perfectly. She saw the truth of the paperwork and the bureaucrats, and she would find a way to make the two truths meet. I'll recategorize them as standard maintenance buffer. They won't know the difference. Their break time was in a small lounge overlooking the bay. A large, slightly flickering view screen was mounted on the wall, usually showing cargo manifests or safety announcements. Today, it was tuned to the Galactic feed, showing highlights from the Emperor's Grand Tour. They watched as a sleek, insectoid warrior from the Keldar hives moved in a blur, striking down automated combat drones with its razor-sharp limbs. Incredible speed. The commentator's voice boomed. The Emperor observed with great interest. Sumin sipped her drink. Looks expensive. All that polished chitin and those articulation servos. Jinho's eyes weren't on the warrior's form. They were fixed on the weapon in its lower hand, a polished plasma rifle. It's going to fail, he said simply. What? The rifle. See the faint glow near the tertiary coupling on the barrel? It's a hair too bright. That's a stress fracture in the containment weld, brewing. The metal is fatigued, probably from overheating during rapid-fire drills. They polished the outside but didn't check the inside. On screen, the Keldar warrior posed triumphantly, the rifle held high. The Emperor, a distant, regal figure seated on a portable version of his throne, gave a slow, unreadable nod. You don't know that, Sumin said, but her tone was curious, not dismissive. I know metal, Jinho shrugged, and I know rushed work. The feed cut to another champion, a massive Vorn in ornate powered armor, boasting about its invulnerable shields. Jinho pointed at the armor's knee joint. See the slight hitch in its stride? The hydraulic sequencer is out of sync. Probably a dirty fluid line. In a real fight, that leg would lock up for a half-second. That's all it takes. Sumin watched him now, not the screen. She had seen this before. Jinho could listen to an engine and tell you its life story. He could look at a weld and know if the worker was tired when they made it. It was a quiet, deep understanding that had nothing to do with fighting and everything to do with caring for how things worked. The screen showed the Vorn champion later in a simulated battle. As it pivoted to fire, the leg did indeed lock. It was only for a moment, but it was enough for a drone to score a simulated kill shot. The champion was eliminated. The camera zoomed in on the Emperor's face as the Vorn roared in frustration. The old ruler's expression was one of profound disappointment. He had seen the flaw too, but he didn't know the cause. He just saw another failure. Sumin whistled low. You called it. It wasn't a guess, Jinho said, turning away from the screen. He found the spectacle vaguely sad. All that effort, all that pride, undone by a tiny, ignored detail. It was shoddy craftsmanship, and it was being celebrated as high drama. Back in the bay, as he finished aligning the barge's plasma injector, his mind was on the work. His world was here, in the tangible reality of connections, alignments, and pressures. It was a world of cause and effect. You applied the right force, the right part, the right care, and the machine sang. You did not, and it failed. It was a simple, honest truth. He did not think of emperors or tournaments. That was a distant galaxy away, a world of performance and politics that had no place among the honest grime of his dock. The Starlight barge's captain would get his ship back, more reliable than ever. That was Jinho's victory. It was enough. Outside the bay's large observation window, the endless stars glittered, cold and silent. The Imperial fleet, with its weary ruler, was moving steadily, sector by sector, drawing a little closer to the Cygnus sector with each passing day. A low, resonant hum shook the very bones of Dockyard Station Theta. It wasn't the familiar rumble of a freighter's engines or the sharp crack of a metal stress test. This was deeper, heavier, a sound that made the recycled air vibrate. Every worker in the main bay stopped what they were doing. Tools went quiet. The constant hiss of a plasma torch sputtered out. Everyone turned toward the massive, armored viewing ports that looked out into the blackness of space. Outside, a ship was blotting out the stars. It wasn't just large. It was immense. The Imperial flagship, the Sovereign Dawn, looked less like a ship and more like a floating mountain of dark metal and glittering weapon ports. Its shape was elegant and terrifying, a symbol of absolute power that had, until now, only ever been seen on news feeds. Smaller attendant vessels, sleek as knives, buzzed around it like pilot fish. One of those smaller ships was detaching, heading straight for the dock's primary airlock. On the command walkway, Foreman Park was frantically tapping his datapad, his face pale. They're requesting immediate docking and full station hospitality protocols. Imperial codes. This isn't a drill. Panic, sharp and electric, shot through the bay. The Emperor's tour was here, on Theta. It made no sense. This was a maintenance outpost, a refueling stop, a place of grease and grit, not champions and glory. Jin-ho floated near the starlight barge, his micrograv sled humming softly. He watched the sleek shuttle connect to the airlock with a magnetic thunk that echoed through the station's superstructure. Sumin pushed off a wall to float beside him, her datapad forgotten. "Why?" was all she could whisper. The answer came over the station's comms in the crisp, bored voice of an imperial official. "By order of His Serene Majesty Emperor Kalon, this facility has been selected for imperial assessment. All personnel will assemble in the central docking bay for inspection and potential testing. Compliance is mandatory." Foreman Park's voice, shaky, followed. "Everyone, to the main bay, now, and for Star's sake, look presentable." There was a frantic scramble. People tried to wipe grease from their faces, smooth down their hair, straighten their stained coveralls. It was a hopeless task. Theta was what it was. Jin-ho simply stowed his tools in their case and followed the current of bodies, his mind working. An assessment? Here? It had to be a clerical error. Someone must have entered a wrong sector code. Theta had no warriors. It had mechanics, welders, cargo loaders. The inner doors to the main docking bay hissed open. The Imperial shuttle dominated the room. Its hull was a mirror-like silver, reflecting the grimy, nervous faces of the dockworkers in distorted funhouse shapes. A ramp extended, and a squad of the Imperial Guard marched down. Their armor was not the powered plate of frontline soldiers. It was a simpler, more severe black, polished to a matte finish. Their faces were hidden behind opaque helms. At their head was Guard Captain Tae-sik. His face was visible, stern, and impassive, his eyes scanning the crowd like a scanner assessing defective parts. Finally, Emperor Kalon himself descended the ramp. He wore simpler robes than in the broadcasts, a deep gray that seemed to absorb the bay's harsh light, but the ring of office on his finger glinted coldly. His ancient eyes swept across the cavernous bay, over the gantries, the dangling chains, the half-dismantled engine blocks on racks. He saw the grease-stained floors, the flickering light panels, the workers huddled together with a mix of fear and confusion. His expression, already weary, seemed to settle into a deeper layer of disappointment. This was clearly not a place of hidden champions. Foreman Park bowed so low he almost stumbled. "Glorious Emperor, welcome to Dockyard Station Theta. We are honored beyond words. We are simple workers, but we are at your service." Admiral Daehyun, who had followed the Emperor, looked around with open disdain. "This is a waste of time," he muttered, just loud enough for those nearby to hear. "The data file was corrupted. This is a maintenance post." Emperor Kalon held up a hand, silencing him. His voice, though tired, filled the space. "The decree was for all. We are here. Let the assessment proceed." Captain Tae-sik gave a sharp nod. Two of his guards wheeled out a large metallic crate from the shuttle. With a series of clicks, it unfolded, assembling itself into a tall, humanoid form, a royal combat drone. It was a standard testing model used across the galaxy. Its photoreceptor glowed a soft blue as it powered up, taking a ready stance in the center of the cleared floor. Its purpose was simple: to test a challenger's combat skill point one by one. The strongest workers from Theta were pushed forward. Big Sung, who moved cargo containers by hand in high-grav bays, went first. He swung a heavy wrench. The drone evaded with liquid ease and tapped his chest with a stun prod. Sung collapsed. Ji-hyun, a former station security officer, tried next. She was fast and knew some martial forms. The drone analyzed her patterns in 3 moves and disarmed her, sending her sliding across the floor with a gentle but firm energy pulse. The tests continued. A welder with steady nerves, a loader with quick reflexes. All failed. The drone was not trying to hurt them, just to demonstrate their total lack of combat prowess. Each failure seemed to make the air heavier. The Emperor watched, his face like stone. The hope that had briefly flickered in his eyes upon arrival, the hope of an interesting anomaly, had died. This was just another dead end in a long line of them. Admiral Daehyun sighed audibly. "Assessment complete, Your Majesty. No viable subjects. We should depart for the next system. The Emperor nodded slowly. He turned, his robes swirling, and began to walk back toward the shuttle ramp. The visit was over. Theta had been weighed and found to be exactly what it appeared. Insignificant as the Emperor took his first step onto the ramp, a voice cut through the silent, defeated atmosphere of the bay. "Your Majesty." The voice was not loud, but it was clear. It was the voice of someone used to being heard over engine noise. Every head turned. Guard Captain Tae-Sik's hand went to the weapon at his side. Jin-Ho took a small step forward from the crowd. He held a greasy rag in one hand. He bowed, not the deep bow of the foreman, but a short, respectful nod of the head. His coveralls were a mess, his hands stained dark. "The test?" Jin-Ho said, meeting the Emperor's gaze as the old ruler turned back, surprised. "It is flawed." A total, profound silence fell. Admiral Daehyun's mouth opened in outrage. Captain Tae-Sik took a threatening step forward. But Emperor Kalon raised a single finger. His tired eyes were now fixed on the mechanic. There was no anger in them, only a faint, rekindled spark of curiosity. He looked from the mechanic's honest, worried face to the perfect, poised combat drone, and back again. "Explain." The Emperor commanded, and the word hung in the greasy air. The silence in the docking bay did not break until the Imperial shuttle detached from the airlock with a soft thump. The deep, world-shaking hum of the Sovereign Dawn's engines resonated through the station's skeleton as the flagship turned, blotted out the stars, and vanished into the dark. It was gone as suddenly as it had arrived. For a long moment, nobody moved. They all just stood, looking at the empty space where the shuttle had been, then at each other, then finally at Jin-Ho. He was still standing in the middle of the floor, looking a little lost. Then, the noise returned. It wasn't the normal work noise. It was a wave of disbelieving chatter, laughter, and excited shouts. Workers slapped each other's backs. Someone cheered. Foreman Park was mopping his brow with a cloth, muttering about protocols and historical events. But he was smiling. Sumin pushed through the crowd and reached Jin-Ho. She didn't say anything. She just punched him lightly in the arm and shook her head, her eyes wide. "I think I need to sit down," Jin-Ho said quietly. He didn't get the chance. Within the hour, official Imperial dispatches began flooding the station's comms network. They were not addressed to a champion, but to the Dockyard Administration and the Galactic Logistics Guild. Foreman Park called everyone to the main screen. The first decree was simple. The Emperor's Grand Tour was officially concluded. All further martial assessments were cancelled. The news feeds, which had been buzzing with speculation about the next champion, fell into confused silence. The second decree was longer. It established a new Imperial office, the Royal Observer of Foundations. Its mandate was to audit the truth of function in critical Imperial systems, not just weapons but engines, life support, hyperdrives, and communication arrays. The office would have the authority to requisition parts and demand maintenance. The first appointment was pending. The third decree was for Dockyard Station Theta specifically. It was reclassified as a Grade A priority maintenance hub. Its budget was increased fivefold. New, modern tools, better environmental systems, and upgraded safety equipment were to be supplied immediately. Worker hazard pay scales were elevated to match those of frontline engineering corps. The final message was a personal data packet for Jin-Ho. He opened it in the quiet of the tool locker, away from the crowds. Contained no video, only text. It was from the office of the Emperor, signed by a senior clerk, but the words felt different. "The Emperor has directed that you be offered the position of Royal Observer of Foundations, with all attendant privileges and authority. You would report directly to the throne. Your primary duty is to ensure that the machinery of the Empire functions with truth, as you demonstrated." There was more, a list of benefits, a staggering salary, a residence on the capital world. It described a life of polish and politics, of inspecting grand starships in shiny hangars. Jin-Ho read it twice. Then he closed the file. He found Sumin by the main viewing port, looking out at the stars. The familiar, messy orbit of Theta was littered with cargo pods and old fuel tankers. It was home. "They'll send a transport for you in 3 days." she said, not looking at him. You'll be a senior imperial official. No more Greece. I don't know anything about being an official, he said. You know about truth and function, she replied, echoing the decree. That seems to be the only thing that matters now. Jinho joined her at the window. He watched a small repair tug guide a battered freighter into berth 4. He thought of the Starlight barge, its plasma injector now singing in perfect alignment. He thought of the feel of a tool in his hand, the direct connection between a problem and a solution. In a shiny office on the capital world, a problem would be a report. A solution would be a memo. The connection would be broken. I'm not going, he said. Sumin finally looked at him, surprised. He didn't smile because I wanted a title, Jinho said. He smiled because I was doing my job. Right here. This is where the work is. This is where the truth is. He pointed out at the dockyard, at the grimy, vital chaos of it. If I go there, I become part of the show. I stop being the mechanic. He sent his reply that evening. It was short. He thanked the Emperor for the honor. He respectfully declined the personal appointment. However, he accepted the role of local observer for the Cygnus sector, based on Theta. He requested that the increased funding and tools be delivered as promised, and he nominated Sumin to manage the new logistics, because she knew where every part was. A reply came the next day. It was one word, approved by the Emperor's seal, granted. Weeks later, the changes were real. New air scrubbers made the bay smell less like fumes. The lighting was brighter and didn't flicker. Brand new toolkits arrived, and Jinho ensured they were given to the crews who needed them most. Worker morale, always steady, now hummed with a new pride. They weren't just a backwater dock anymore. They were a foundation. On the capital world, in his private chamber, Emperor Kalon reviewed a report. It was a dry summary from the Cygnus sector. Efficiency up 18%, critical repair times down 32%, worker safety incidents at an all-time low. Attached was a simple image from a dockyard security cam. It showed Jinho, back in his stained coveralls, leaning over a reactor core with a young apprentice, pointing at something, his face calm and focused. The Emperor did not watch grand battles on his screen anymore. He sometimes looked at reports from various docks and shipyards. He looked for the truth of function. He leaned back in his throne, the great obsidian throne that no longer felt so heavy. He thought of the mechanic's hands, of the quiet certainty in his voice. He thought of the simple, profound power of making a broken thing whole. A small, peaceful smile touched the Emperor's lips once more. It was not for the cameras. It was for the understanding that the strongest thing in his vast empire was not a weapon at all. It was a well-made weld holding everything together. Jinho looked from the Emperor's expectant face to the combat drone. It stood poised, a perfect instrument of assessment. It did not hate. It did not tire. It would simply analyze and react. He felt a knot tighten in his stomach. This was not his world. His world was fixing things, not fighting them. Captain Tasik stepped forward, his expression unreadable. The test is non-lethal. The drone will use graded energy pulses. A direct hit to the torso or head simulates a kill. A limb hit reduces mobility. The objective is to last as long as possible or to disable the drone. Admiral Daehyun crossed his arms, a faint, cold smile on his lips. He was waiting for the farce to end. The mechanic would be on the ground in 3 seconds, and this waste of precious time would be over. Jinho took a slow breath. The air still smelled of grease and ozone. He looked at the drone, but he did not see an opponent. He saw the machine he had just repaired. He knew its weight distribution, the capacity of its servos, the range of motion in its joints. He knew the algorithm it would use. Assess, predict, counter. It was a problem of physics and programming, not of war. Begin, said Emperor Kalon. The drone moved. It was fast, a blur of silver. It closed the distance in a heartbeat, its right arm snapping out in a precise, measured strike aimed at Jinho's shoulder. Jinho did not try to block. He didn't know how. Instead, he took a single step back and to the left. The drone's fist passed through the space where he had been. It was not a warrior's dodge. It was the movement of a man avoiding a swinging crane arm on a busy dock. The drone recalibrated instantly. It pivoted on its left foot, its right leg sweeping in a low arc to trip him. Jin-ho had seen the slight preparatory shift in its hips. He knew the sequence. He simply hopped, a clumsy, ungraceful hop, and the legs swept under him. He stumbled as he landed, off balance. But he was not hit that a murmur went through the crowd. He had avoided 2 attacks. Through luck, it seemed. The drone advanced, its arms a series of controlled, efficient strikes. Jin-ho backpedaled. He didn't match its rhythm. He disrupted it. He moved erratically, not with skill, but with a kind of desperate intuition. He was not predicting the drone's next attack. He was remembering its technical specs. Its left lateral lunge had a recovery time of 0.2 seconds. Its overhead strike left its core stabilizers engaged for a half-second longer. He saw the machine, not the fight. A strike came for his head. He ducked. Not a slick evasion, but a sudden drop, almost losing his footing. The energy pulse hissed over him. He came up too close to the drone. Instinctively, he put a hand on its chest plate to push himself away. His fingers felt the seam where he had just closed the access panel. It was still warm. The drone grabbed for his wrist. Jin-ho yanked his arm back, and the drone's grip closed on empty air. He was panting now, his heart pounding. This was exhaustion, not combat flow. The Emperor watched, leaning forward slightly on his portable throne. He was not watching a fight. He was watching a man navigate a complex, dangerous machine. The mechanic's movements were awful. He had no style, no grace, no power. But he had something else, understanding. He was surviving not by being better than the machine, but by knowing its operational truths. The drone, following its program to defeat a combatant, switched tactics. It feigned a left strike and then drove forward for a tackle. Aiming to grapple and end the test, Jin-ho saw the feint. He recognized the power surge to the left side motivators from the maintenance logs he'd glanced at. It was a textbook diversion. Instead of falling for it, he did the only thing he could think of. He dropped flat to the floor. The drone, committed to its tackle, sailed over him. It twisted in midair to land cleanly, but the move had cost it. For the first time, it had been made to look inelegant. Jin-ho scrambled to his feet, his coveralls dusty. He was at his limit. He couldn't keep this up. The drone turned, its photoreceptor glowing. It would not tire. It would not lose focus. Then, Jin-ho stopped moving. He stood still, his chest heaving. He held up both hands, palms out. Not a surrender, but a halt. The drone paused, its combat protocols analyzing this new, non-aggressive stance. Enough, Jin-ho said, his voice rough but clear. He wasn't speaking to the drone. He was speaking to the Emperor. He looked past the machine directly at Kalon. The machine is now perfect. You asked me to show you what I do with the truth. This is it. He pointed at the drone. To defeat it now, I would have to break it again. I would have to find a new flaw, force a malfunction, damage the work I just did. He lowered his hands, shaking his head. A quiet certainty filled his voice. That is not my job. My job is to fix things, to make them work as they should. I cannot break a thing I just made whole. He stood there, unarmed, breathing heavily, staring down the perfect, undefeated combat drone. He had not landed a single blow. He had not shown a single warrior skill. But he had lasted longer than any of Theta's strongmen. He had done it by listening, by seeing, and by respecting the machine more than he feared it. The drone remained in its ready stance, waiting for a command. The entire bay waited for the Emperor's. Kalon said nothing for a long moment. He looked at the mechanic, standing in his stained clothes, refusing to fight a battle he never asked for. He looked at the flawless drone, a tool that had been broken and was now whole. He saw the profound difference between the two. One sought to break the world to prove its strength. The other sought to understand it, to keep it running. The Emperor did not give the order for the drone to continue. He simply stared, the wheels of centuries of thought turning slowly in his mind. The spark he had been searching for was not a flash of violent light. It was the steady, honest glow of a worklight in a repair bay. Silence held the docking bay in a perfect, frozen grip. The only movement was the faint shimmer of energy around the idle combat drone and the steady rise and fall of Jinho's chest as he caught his breath. He kept his hands raised, not in surrender, but in a statement of fact. He would not break the machine. Admiral Daehyun shattered the quiet. His voice was a crack of contempt, a refusal to fight. This is cowardice dressed up as philosophy. He has failed the test, Your Majesty, clearly and utterly. He gestured dismissively at Jinho. This proves nothing except that dockworkers have no spine. Captain Taesik did not speak, but his sharp eyes were fixed on the Emperor, watching for any sign of danger, any signal to act. He saw none. He saw only deep, unblinking contemplation. The Emperor did not look at the Admiral. His gaze was anchored on Jinho. For 300 years, Kalon had been presented with answers. Brute force, clever tactics, unbreakable will. They were all answers to the same tired question. How do you overcome? This man, this grease-stained mechanic, had not given him an answer. He had asked a different question entirely. Why break what is already working? Slowly, Kalon rose from his seat. The rustle of his gray robes was loud in the hush. He stepped down from the low platform and walked toward the center of the floor. The guards tensed, but he waved them back. He passed the perfect, silent drone without a glance. He stopped a few feet from Jinho. He looked at the man's hands. They were scarred, the nails lined with grime no rag could reach. They were not the hands of a killer. They were the hands of a creator, of a restorer. You told me the test was flawed, Kalon said, his voice low, meant only for the two of them, though everyone listened. You fixed the machine. Then you refused to break it. Explain this to me. What is your victory condition? Jinho lowered his hands. He met the Emperor's ancient eyes. He saw not anger, but a genuine, weary curiosity. There is no victory here, Your Majesty. Not in the way you mean. The victory was the fix. The machine works. It is balanced. It is true. That was the goal. Once a thing is true, fighting it is pointless. It's just making more work for yourself. He nodded toward the drone. That unit will now give an accurate test to anyone who faces it. Because it is correct. That is its purpose. To be correct. My purpose was to make it correct. Our purposes met, and they are finished. He swallowed, searching for the right words. You have been testing the strength of the hammer. But a hammer is useless if the nail is bent, or the wood is rotten. You need the eye that sees the bent nail first. Kalon stared at him. He thought of the Vorn champion whose armor had locked. He thought of the Keldar warrior's fractured rifle. He thought of 1,000 spectacular failures caused by unseen tiny flaws. They had all been hammers swinging at bent nails, and they had all failed, not for lack of strength, but for lack of sight. A strange feeling stirred in the Emperor's chest. It was not excitement. It was not joy. It was relief. It was the profound, simple relief of seeing a thing that was finally, unquestionably true. This man's honesty was as solid and unpolished as a titanium bolt. The Emperor turned and looked at his admiral. Daehyun, you believe strength is only in the strike. It is the foundation of the empire. Majesty, Daehyun replied stiffly. And what strikes the blade that forges the sword? Kalon asked softly. What aligns the cannon that fires the bolt? What maintains the hyperdrive that brings our strength to distant stars? He paused, letting the questions hang. We celebrate the sword, but we ignore the anvil. We revere the cannon and forget the lathe. We are a galaxy of admiring the swing, and we have all gone dizzy. He turned back to the crowd, to the dockworkers with their wide, astonished eyes. This place, this insignificant dock, is full of anvils and lathes. It is a foundation, and I have been staring at the rooftops of the galaxy, wondering why the view was so hollow. Then, Emperor Kalon did something no one in that room, perhaps no one alive, had ever seen. He looked at Jinho, at his honest confusion and his grease-stained clothes, and he smiled. It was not a wide smile. It was a small, quiet, genuine unfolding of the lips. It did not reach his eyes with wild joy, but it smoothed the centuries of weary lines around them. It was the smile of a man who has been lost in a complex puzzle and has finally found the single, simple piece that makes sense of everything else. The sight of it was more shocking than any warrior's feat. Captain Tasik's stern composure slipped for a second, revealing pure astonishment. Admiral Daehyun looked as if he had been physically struck. A soft, collective gasp rippled through the dockworkers. Sumin put a hand over her mouth. The Emperor's smile faded, but the piece of it remained on his face. The hunt was over. The spark was found. It was not in a furnace blast, but in the steady, useful heat of a welding torch. The tournament, Emperor Kalon announced, his voice now carrying a new tone, not of command but of declaration, is ended. We have searched for a champion in the wrong places. We sought the flame and ignored the hearth. He gestured to Jinho and then to all of them. The strength that holds the galaxy together does not shout its name in arenas. It whispers in the alignment of gears. It speaks in the truth of a well-made weld. He looked at Jinho one last time, giving a slow, respectful nod. It was not an emperor to a subject. It was one craftsman recognizing another. You have given me an answer to a question I had forgotten how to ask. Thank you. With that, he turned. The smile was gone from his lips, but not from his eyes. He walked past the silent drone, past his stunned admiral, and started back toward his shuttle. The weight of 300 years seemed a little lighter on his shoulders. He had not found a warrior to guard his body. He had found a mechanic who had, without even trying, fixed something in his spirit. The silence in the docking bay was so complete that Jinho could hear the faint, high-pitched whine of the combat drone's motivator as it stood in standby mode. Every eye was on him. He felt the weight of the Emperor's stare, the sharp disapproval from the Admiral, the protective threat from the guard captain. Sumin, somewhere in the crowd, was holding her breath. Jinho wiped his hands slowly on the rag, a habit to give his mind a moment to settle. He nodded toward the drone. The test measures the person against the machine. But the machine is not perfect. It favors its left side. Its balance is off by maybe half a degree. That changes everything. Admiral Daehyun scoffed, a harsh sound in the quiet. Preposterous. That is a royal assessment drone, maintained to the highest standard. You insult the Imperial. Let him speak, Emperor Kalon said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the Admiral's protest like a laser. The Emperor was still looking at Jinho, not with anger, but with the focused attention of a scientist observing a new species. How do you know this? By listening, Jinho said. He pointed his chin at the drone. The motivator whine is uneven. A clean gyro has a smooth tone. This one has a tiny catch in the cycle like a speck of dust in a bearing. Subtle, but it's there. And watch its resting stance. Everyone, including the Emperor, looked at the drone. It stood perfectly still. Look at the distribution of weight on its feet, Jinho continued, walking a few steps closer. Captain Tasik tensed but did not stop him. The pressure sensors in the floor here are old, but you can see the readout on that maintenance panel. He pointed to a dusty screen on the wall, showing schematics of the bay. See? 51% of its weight is on the left footplate. It's compensating automatically for the imbalance in its core. It's a tiny favor, but in a fight, that means its reactions will be a fraction faster to the left, and its right-side maneuvers will have a tiny lag. It's not a true test. The Emperor's eyes flicked to the maintenance screen, then back to the drone. A lifetime of observing the finest details in combat had given him an eye for such things. Now that it was pointed out, he could see it. The drone was not symmetrical. It was minutely tilted. You diagnose a machine by its sound and its shadow? The Emperor asked. I diagnose it by what it is, Jinho replied. A thing made of parts. Parts wear out. Even imperial ones. Admiral Daehyun was furious. This is meaningless technical chatter. The principle of the test is, the principle is flawed if the tool is broken, Emperor Kalon interrupted, his gaze still locked on Jinho. A new idea was forming in his mind. an idea so different from the endless parades of warriors that it felt fresh. You say you can see its flaw. Can you fix it? Gino blinked. That wasn't the question he expected. Yes. And how long would it take you? Jinho studied the drone, his head tilted. 15 minutes. Maybe 20 if the Euro housing is stuck. A murmur rippled through the dockworkers. The Imperial guards shifted. Fix the Emperor's own drone? Here? Now? Proceed, Emperor Kalon said. He did not smile, but the deep lines of boredom on his face seemed to soften. Just a little. Captain Taesik looked at his emperor, concerned. Your Majesty, the security risk. The risk is in not knowing if this man speaks the truth, Kalon said. He motioned for Jinho to come forward. You have your tools? Jinho held up his small, worn personal case. Yes. Then do it. The bay became a theater. The Emperor, the Admiral, the guards, and hundreds of workers watched as Jinho approached the royal drone. He didn't look at the crowd. He looked at the machine. He circled it once, listening. Then he set his case down, clicked it open, and selected a few tools. A multi-driver, a microcalibrator, a can of conductive lubricant. He found the access panel on the drone's lower back. The seals were pristine. He broke them with a soft pop. Inside was a complex array of micromotors and spinning gyroscopes, all glowing with soft blue light. He leaned in, his eyes narrowing. The Euro is here, he said, mostly to himself. The housing is magnetic. It's not dust. There's a tiny burr on the inner race, a manufacturing flaw. It's been there since it was built. He reached in with a slender tool, his movements steady and precise. There was no hesitation. He knew the path his tools needed to take in the silence. The tiny sounds of his work were amplified. The click of a fastener, the soft scrape of metal, the hiss of the lubricant spray. He didn't see the Emperor watching his hands with intense interest. He didn't see Sumin's proud, nervous smile. He saw only the problem and the solution. He removed the offending Euro assembly, smoothed the burr with 3 precise strokes of a file, cleaned it and reseated it. He ran the calibrator, its screen lighting up with streams of numbers. He made 2 small adjustments. Then he closed the access panel and applied a fresh seal from his own kit. He stood up and stepped back. It is done. You can reactivate it fully now. Captain Taesik looked to the Emperor, who gave a single nod. A guard used a control pad. The drone's photoreceptor glowed brightly. It shifted its stance, a series of small, almost silent servos whirring. Everyone looked at the old maintenance screen on the wall. The weight distribution flickered and then settled. 50% on the left footplate, 50% on the right. Perfect balance. The drone took a single, smooth step forward. Its movement was different. It was fluid, silent, and perfectly centered. There was no hint of a favor to either side. Emperor Kalon observed the change. He had seen 10,000 machines move, but he had never seen one healed. He looked at Jinho, who was putting his tools away, wiping the calibrator on his rag. The test remains, the Emperor announced, his voice echoing. But now the tool is true. You identified its flaw. You repaired it. Now you will face it. Jinho looked up, his calm finally breaking into surprise. Face it? Your Majesty, I am not a warrior. That is precisely why you will face it, the Emperor said. A strange light was in his old eyes. You have shown me the truth of the machine. Now show me what you do with that truth.